Have you ever felt the cold grip of fear on a night when the wind howls like a pack of wolves? Picture this, a dark, stormy night where the rain pelts the windows like tiny bullets, and every shadow seems to come alive. Tonight we dive into the most horrifying case you've never heard of, one that will send chills down your spine and make you question reality itself. Meet Valerie Wilson, a seemingly ordinary woman whose life hides the darkest of secrets. Stay with me as we unravel her spine-tingling story, where nothing is as it seems, and every revelation is more terrifying than the last. The calm before the storm begins in Valerie's quiet suburban neighborhood, where life seemed almost idyllic. Valerie Wilson, a dedicated teacher, spent her days inspiring young minds and her evenings curled up with a good book. She lived alone in a charming two-story house with a white picket fence, a picturesque scene of normalcy, but beneath this seemingly perfect life, there were subtle signs of an approaching darkness. Valerie often felt a sense of unease, a feeling she couldn't quite put into words. It started with small things, misplaced items, the occasional creak in the floorboards when she was sure no one else was home, and the eerie feeling of being watched. Friends and colleagues saw her as the picture of stability, always calm and collected. Yet Valerie began to notice shadows moving in the corners of her eyes, fleeting figures that disappeared when she turned her head. She brushed it off as stress or an overactive imagination, unwilling to believe these unsettling occurrences could mean anything more. Valerie's dreams, once peaceful, became disturbed by vague, haunting visions that left her waking in a cold sweat. Her once safe and predictable world was slowly becoming a web of uncertainties. The line between reality and illusion began to blur, setting the stage for the terror that would soon engulf her life. The first sign of trouble involved an ordinary night that turned into Valerie's worst nightmare. Valerie, exhausted from a long day of teaching, decided to unwind with a cup of tea and her favorite book. As she settled into her cozy armchair, the all-too-familiar silence of her empty home wrapped around her like a blanket. But tonight, silence was not her ally. Just as she began to lose herself in the pages of her book, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen, shattering the tranquility. Valerie's heart raced as she cautiously rose to investigate, her mind racing with rational explanations. A fallen pot maybe, or perhaps the wind had blown something over. She hesitated at the kitchen doorway, peering into the darkened room. To her horror, she found the source of the noise. Every single cabinet door hung open, swinging slightly as if they had just been flung wide. Dishes lay smashed on the floor, silverware scattered like fallen soldiers. Valerie's breath caught in her throat. She lived alone. There should have been no one to wreak such havoc. As she carefully stepped into the kitchen, glass crunching underfoot, an icy feeling crept up her spine. She sensed a presence, an unseen force that seemed to watch her every move. Just then the lights began to flicker, casting eerie shadows that twisted and danced on the walls. Valerie's pulse was a drumbeat in her ears as she backed away, her mind grappling with this new, terrifying reality. She tried to call out, but her voice betrayed her, coming out as a mere whisper. Gathering the last of her courage, she slammed the cabinet doors shut and cleaned the broken dishes, each step feeling like a scene from some gruesome nightmare. That night, sleep offered no escape. Her dreams were tormented by the same flickering lights and the sensation of being watched, only now there were chilling whispers that filled her ears, unintelligible but malevolent. Valerie awoke gasping for breath, drenched in sweat, the darkness of her room pressing in around her. She realized then that the tranquility of her life had been shattered, replaced by a creeping dread that would not be easily dispelled. This was only the beginning. The descent into darkness began with Valerie's increasing sense of paranoia. Every creak, every flicker of light seemed to mock her, pulling her deeper into a maddening spiral. Her once orderly home began to turn against her. Doors would slam shut without warning, and windows would rattle even on calm days. Valerie started to see faces in mirrors that weren't her own, ghastly visages that would vanish the moment she blinked. Her sleep, already disturbed, now became a battleground of nightmares so vivid they felt real. Each morning, she would wake up more exhausted than before, the lines between her dreams and reality blurring insidiously. Valerie's once clear and logical mind started to fray. She began keeping a journal, meticulously documenting each strange event in hopes of making sense of it all. The entries, however, became more frantic, filled with desperate scribbles and erratic handwriting. Her pleas for understanding turned into cries for help from a force she couldn't comprehend. Valerie's behavior started to change, making those around her worry. At school, she became more withdrawn, her cheerful demeanor replaced by a haunted look in her eyes. Students whispered about their teacher's sudden transformation, noticing how she would sometimes stare blankly at the classroom walls, as if seeing something terrifying only she could perceive. Her colleagues attempted to reach out, but Valerie kept them at arm's length, afraid of dragging others into whatever horror had claimed her life. Desperation drove her to research the history of her house, hoping to uncover a rational explanation for the chaos. What she discovered only deepened her fear. The previous owner, a reclusive artist, had mysteriously disappeared years ago, leaving behind a series of disturbing paintings that Valerie found hidden in the attic. The grotesque images depicted a shadowy figure looming over the house, its malevolent eyes watching from every corner. One painting in particular struck a chilling chord. It was a portrait of her living room with her own face twisted in terror, painted in unsettling detail. The uncanny resemblance shook her to her core. Valerie sought help from paranormal experts, but their visits only seemed to amplify the disturbances. They spoke of a restless spirit, a dark presence feeding on her fear. Some even refused to return after witnessing inexplicable phenomena firsthand. Valerie's isolation grew, her world shrinking to the confines of her tormented mind and haunted home. Friends, once supportive, began to distance themselves, unable to comprehend the extent of her suffering. The final straw came one night when Valerie, driven to the brink, begged for answers out loud. She stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by the oppressive darkness, and demanded to know why this was happening to her. In response, a cacophony of whispers filled the room, and the shadowy figure from the paintings materialized before her eyes, its presence suffocating. Valerie's scream echoed through the empty halls as the entity surged towards her, and then everything went black. When she awoke, she found herself on the living room floor, disoriented and drenched in sweat. The house was eerily silent, but the sense of dread lingered, more powerful than ever. Valerie realized that she was no longer just a victim of these sinister occurrences. She was now entangled in something far darker and more dangerous, a descent from which there seemed no escape. The truth uncovered begins with Valerie's relentless search for answers finally bearing fruit. After countless sleepless nights and exhaustive research, she stumbled upon an old, dusty journal hidden beneath the floorboards of her attic. The journal belonged to the house's previous owner, the reclusive artist who had mysteriously vanished. Each entry painted a grim picture, chronicling a descent into madness eerily similar to her own. The artist spoke of a malevolent entity, a dark force tied to a cursed object within the house. The details were fragmented and cryptic, but one thing was clear. This entity had latched onto the artist, feeding off his fear and driving him to the brink of insanity. Valerie's heart pounded as she read on, her own experiences mirroring the artist's chillingly. One entry mentioned a peculiar artifact, a small wooden box carved with strange symbols, believed to hold the spirit of a tormented soul. The artist had found it hidden within the walls of the house, and since then had been plagued by disturbing visions and unexplainable phenomena. Determined to uncover the truth, Valerie set out to find this cursed box. She tore through the walls of her home, her desperation growing with each passing hour. Finally, hidden deep within a crawl space, she found it, a weathered, ornate box, the surface etched with symbols that seemed to writhe under her gaze. With trembling hands, she opened it to reveal a collection of brittle, yellowed letters and a locket containing a faded photograph of a young woman. The letters, written in a scrawling, desperate hand, told the story of the woman in the photo. She was a tormented soul, trapped in an abusive marriage and driven to despair. In her anguish, she turned to dark rituals, attempting to summon a spirit to take revenge on her husband. The ritual went horribly wrong, and instead of freeing herself, she bound her own soul to the house forever. The malevolent presence that had haunted Valerie and the artist before her was none other than this tormented woman, forever seeking release from her eternal suffering. Valerie realized that the spirit's hold on the house was fueled by the fear and despair of its inhabitants, feeding on their terror to grow stronger. Armed with this knowledge, Valerie sought to perform a ritual to release the spirit and end her torment. She followed the instructions meticulously, tracing the symbols, lighting the candles, and reciting the incantations from the letters. As she completed the final words, a chilling wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles and plunging her into darkness. For a moment, the oppressive silence was deafening, and then a wail, mournful and piercing, echoed through the house. The temperature plummeted, and Valerie felt the spirit's presence materialize before her. It was the woman from the photograph, her ghostly form twisted with pain and rage. Valerie stood her ground, her voice trembling but resolute, and spoke the final words of the ritual. The spirit's scream reached a fever pitch, and then, with a blinding flash of light, the presence was gone. The house fell silent once more, but this time it was a peaceful silence. The oppressive weight lifted. Valerie collapsed to the floor, tears streaming down her face, a mix of relief and exhaustion washing over her. The cursed box lay empty before her, its power finally broken. Valerie knew that she could never forget the horrors she had endured, but she also knew that she had triumphed over the darkness. The torment that had claimed the lives of those before her was finally laid to rest, and the spirit of the tormented woman was freed from her eternal suffering. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the windows, casting a warm glow over the room. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Valerie felt a sense of peace. She stepped outside, breathing in the fresh morning air, and vowed to rebuild her life stronger and more resilient than before. The case of Valerie Wilson would forever be a dark chapter in her life, but it was also a testament to her courage and determination in the face of unimaginable terror. The horrifying truth had been uncovered, and with it a new beginning. The aftermath for Valerie Wilson was a journey of recovery and rediscovery. The horrors she endured left deep scars on her psyche, but they also instilled in her a profound sense of resilience. In the weeks that followed, Valerie sought the help of therapists and support groups, determined to confront her trauma head-on. She found solace in sharing her story with others who had faced their own demons, realizing that she was not alone in her struggle. The once cheerful and dedicated teacher gradually regained her footing, finding new ways to inspire and connect with her students. Her house, however, remained a bittersweet reminder of her ordeal. Valerie decided to renovate, transforming the once haunted space into a sanctuary of light and warmth. Each stroke of paint, every new piece of furniture, symbolized her reclaiming of power from the darkness that had once consumed her life. The cursed box, now an empty relic, was buried deep in the earth, ensuring that its malevolent influence would never harm another soul. Reflecting on her experience, Valerie saw the importance of facing one's fears and the power of hope and determination. The themes of her story extended beyond the supernatural. They spoke to the human condition, to the battles we all face within our minds and hearts. Valerie's journey was a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the capacity for growth even in the darkest of times. But as Valerie moved forward, a chilling final thought lingered. One evening, as she sat quietly on her porch, the twilight casting long shadows across the yard, she felt a familiar, fleeting chill. It was as if the air had shifted, a whisper of something ancient and unseen passing by. For a brief moment, the shadows seemed to dance again, twisting into shapes that bore an eerie resemblance to the past. Valerie shook off the sensation, but it left her with a lingering unease. Had she truly rid herself of the dark presence that had tormented her, or was there more to the story than she understood? As she closed the door and locked it behind her, she couldn't help but glance back one last time, the question echoing in her mind. In the realm of the unknown, certainty is a rare commodity, and sometimes the past never fully lets go. The most horrifying case of Valerie Wilson reminds us that some shadows never entirely fade, leaving us to wonder what might still lurk just beyond the edge of our understanding.